Hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith and it's a joy to welcome you today to this Church Administration, Admin and Ops podcast. We love and are passionate about the work that happens behind the scenes in church life, and it's a privilege for us to serve. And I've got a special guest back again, Anna Wood. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me here again.
It's great, and it's lovely to have you back. And if you're picking up the podcast now, we have been chatting over the last two sessions, just looking and reviewing a survey that we put out to church administrators, which we had over 60 odd people feedback and reply. Lots of questions about how you're doing, what are some of the things your pressure points, how's your capacity going, where are you seeing grace. I loved that session with Lou. Anna and I were talking last time about good habits of a church administrator, and there were some really good points that kind of came out. And we're going to tackle today the bad habits, aren't we?
We are, yeah. Bit of a different vibe to the good habits one.
It is slightly different, isn't it? So yeah, this is going to be interesting, and thank you to everyone who participated in sending stuff in. We're certainly going to publish this in some way on the website for people to connect, because there's things here that we're not going to be able to cover everything, and I think there's some great takeaways. Well, let's start with us, then, shall we? Before we jump into somebody else, we probably need to start with us. And what are some of our bad habits? So I'm not going to put you on the spot, Anna. I'm going to give you a minute just to think while I share one of mine. So I was having a conversation with Emma, my wife, this morning, and she overheard me giving Jack Slocum, one of our new staff members, a hard time because he's just been doing over his hours and here longer than he needs to. He's got young kids and his wife, and so I'm giving him a hard time. And Emma's like, Gav, you are such a hypocrite because you were worse than Jack was. You know, it's got to 8 o'clock some nights and you still weren't home after trying to do it. You know, she said you go to church on church on a Friday at 7 to get a whole load of finance stuff done before people came in, and then you'd be serving on Teams till 10:30 or something. She was like, you're a hypocrite. So I'm going to kick us off with the first bad habit: overdoing the hours. And we're joking about it and smiling about it, and I know we can all connect with this, but this is not good, is it?
It's not ideal, no. I mean, I think this is where it's a really difficult tension point, particularly in our line of work, because so much of what we do is born out of a desire to serve the church, serve God, but we are also employed as employees, and therefore we have to look after ourselves as employees and not overcommit, not overdo, and try and draw the line to ensure that other aspects of life are also balanced. And our families are aware that we still exist, and those sorts of things. So it's a really hard one to make, and I think often it's the people who look in that spot it more than we do in ourselves. So much like you're saying, you were talking to your colleague, your wife is also then able to speak into you. It's often
She's
not ourselves that can
it.
necessarily spot that. So it's good to have other people to remind us of those things.
It is, and we've got to get to the heart of the issue, isn't it? Is what's going on in the heart issue? Is it I need to finish this off to look good, and so much of that is in me and wanting to be seen to be this amazing church administrator that's got everything covered, and actually the hours to do that, to keep that going, is just unrealistic. And so there are some heart issues. There are emergencies and crises, isn't there, when I get called out from the alarm company and you got to come down in the middle of the night, and you count is this hours, and then do you come in later, but then you've got to sort out all the police and all the other things that happen, when we had a break-in a couple of weeks ago. So it really is that the hours bit is the hardest bit, and the heart motives behind it. And
I think it's that motivation is really key, understanding what we are motivated by and for. Because I think you give me a minute to think about my bad habits. Certainly, one of mine would be a sort of an over-controlling nature.
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm in control of what's going on, so that I make sure it's done the way I think it should be done, which in my head is the best way. I appreciate that might not actually be the case. I am humble enough to admit that, but I can't always see it in the moment.
Later.
That's it. that sort of controlling aspect, wanting to make sure it's done well.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easier just to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that does add on to those hours and so on and so forth. And so many of these sort of things that are popping up on the feedback are interconnected, I think, in that way as well. You know, one thing will impact on another. So another one of mine, which isn't my strength, is my delegation, in the sense that I don't want to burden other people by asking them to do something. And so sometimes that can be a positive thing from my point of view. I'm not doing it out of a wrong heart. I'm thinking of others, but actually it's not always ideal for them either, and definitely not ideal for me. And also it can be because I'm trying to control things too much. So
it's
it
interesting.
all fits in together.
Yeah, the whole delegation thing is interesting, because I think what I've learned in the church, I guess, is that people actually really like sometimes the complex tasks. That we often try and hold on to ourselves because we think this is complex, we can't give this to somebody else, you know. But actually, people do like to think about and be used, and have got skills and gifting from their work experience, from the things they've done in the past. And in actual fact, that actually it's okay to delegate the easy things that, you know, get off our lists then. But actually, to give people complex ones and a bit of responsibility actually is good. And I think that finding the right person for that, I'm not saying just go out and give, you know, hey, you know, would you like to do this? And it's, you know, but actually finding people and going, actually, no, they are really competent. They love the church. They love the gospel as much as we do. They may not be able to do it as best, you know, as we think they can do it, maybe as well as we think we can do it ourselves. But actually, I think I found that people actually do it better than I do, actually.
And that comes back into that humility aspect as well, isn't it? Being willing to admit that we're not always the best person to do every single task.
No.
Yeah.
It's true. And so looking at some of the feedback, and I loved it, and I appreciate people's honesty that they've put in here, and we're certainly not going to name any names. But one of the ones which we're kind of touching on there is perfectionism.
Yes.
And overdoing a task has come up with this desire for it to be perfect and wanting everything to be exactly in its place. But that's just not real life in church administration and ops, is it? That there isn't anything that is perfect.
Sadly not.
Yeah.
We want to make sure you do everything you can to the best of your ability, to the best it can be in that context, and whatever the purpose of whatever that task is for. But perfect is probably not necessary in most instances. And it's
just not achievable, is it? And we want there to be a sense. I want there to be a sense of order. I want there to be a sense of peace, and you know, not perfection. So that those are the things that we want to see present. So overdoing a task. So I can spend a long time thinking, we've got to get this graphic right. We've got to get this design right. We want this to be, you know, hit all the boxes and the target markets and all the things that we're thinking about when we're sending out a leaflet into the community. But actually, just if that's going to take another 4 or 5 hours, I have to be able to call it short at some point and go, nah, we got to stop there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can also tie in with that accountability aspect of somebody else who perhaps is just looking in on what we're doing and just saying, do you know, that will work. That will be fine. It'll do the job. It's going to have the right impact that you want. Could it be better? Probably. Yeah. Does it need to be better? Probably not.
Yeah. Now, another one of mine, and I can identify, there's probably another 5 or 6 times it's listed here, is putting pressure on ourselves and giving ourselves kind of self-targets. So, I mean, we were talking yesterday and you were like, I've got a self-target to get my accounts done at this point in time.
Yeah, every year I want to beat my record from last year.
and I do this, and so I'll put pressure on myself, thinking, right, I think our leaders really would like this done sooner rather than later. They haven't asked me, but I'm kind of guessing, and I think it does come back to pride again, because I'm thinking I'm going to be this whiz, get it sorted, and get it in a place where everyone's going to go, oh, Gavin's already done it, amazing.
Yeah.
And actually, that self-target there puts pressure on me, which I then pass down pressure to other people, and and there's no need for it. I've been hugely liberated sometimes by sitting in a pub with Pete Greasley, and him saying to me, Gav, what are your 3 top priorities? And I'll say, right, here it is, this and this, and he'll come to me and say, well, I wouldn't bother doing those 2. Do that one, and let me give you a few other ones that need doing. And you're like, oh, I really, I thought these were like super duper important, but actually, a little bit of outside perspective and a bit of clarity does help. And so, we keep touching on that relationship with the senior pastor or elders in your church and what you're doing. There's got to be that continuous connection, and I can get my priorities and my self-targets, but actually not really be serving in a way that actually does bless the team and bless the church. So
yeah, getting that outside input from who you're trying to work with or serve has got to be an important factor, but it's really easy to actually forget that in the moment when you're planning your own sort of diary for the day or the week or the month or longer.
There was one that did make us both laugh. Go on, you introduce it, because I can't say this is one of my bad habits, but it did make me laugh.
And I can't see it. I'm sorry.
About the notebook.
Oh yes.
So I'm really good at making notes.
Good at making notes, but then lose my notebook.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I've not had that experience. But I am well known for, where's my phone?
Yeah.
Where have I put? Anyone seen my phone? So yeah, I think when you're really busy, it's just super easy to be moving from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
You want to get things done, and
Scatterbrain.
where is the notebook?
Yeah.
Where has it gone? I think another one on here that stands out to me, and people that know me well would probably attest to this, is someone's put always saying yes, and someone else has put saying yes when I mean or should say no.
Yeah.
I think that's a habit which is possibly a good desired one.
Yeah.
You have to look again at the motivations behind it, but in terms of how that plays out, it's not always great to have always said yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are times when it's sensible to think that through.
Yeah.
Before being too willing. That willingness can sometimes not play out in a way that everybody would want. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some good ones. Yeah, overthinking, over planning, over reliance on myself. Yeah, those are good. And unnecessary fear and anxiety, I think that came up quite a lot.
Yeah.
And
someone's written about the reading work emails on your phone in the evening.
Yeah. Not
really being able to do anything about it at that point, and then worrying overnight about what that
something you've just read.
Yeah. It's a really easy thing to do because everything is so accessible now with the tech that most people have. But it's really unhelpful in terms of just allowing yourself to have that rest time as well. And, a good habit would probably be to tackle somehow disabling the ability to read emails after a certain time.
I deleted my ability to access work emails on my phone because it is so tempted, isn't it? So they're still on my computer, so the temptation is still there. but it's so easy on your phone, isn't it? Just to something's just pinged in. I'll have a quick look at it. It's from so and so. Yeah. And then suddenly your heart's racing, thinking, oh no, have I not done something, or should I have done more, or what's going to happen, or all of those things.
You have to really I think you have to really think through what's going to be most helpful for you as an individual in that kind of context, because actually for me, I do still have my emails on my phone, and I will often read them at times which are outside of work hours. I've always done that in my previous job as well, and my colleagues then would always be like, you just take them off your phone, don't have them on your phone. But actually for me as an individual, it was more helpful to know what was there, because actually if I didn't know what was there, I'd be overthinking, thinking, what am I going to be facing in the morning, what's going to be there. So actually I guess it depends a little bit on the individual. So some of these bad habits, as we're sort of calling them bad habits, might not be bad habits for every individual.
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
that's something to consider as
A
well.
little kind of disclaimer there.
Yeah,
Saying
not to,
possibly.
I don't want anyone to be listening to this thinking, oh no, I'm being such an awful
Yeah.
person because I do these things.
Yeah.
Because actually, some of them might work for you as an individual, in the same way that I have my emails on my
Yeah.
phone and you don't. So
Yeah. That is so
we'll,
true.
We'll make sure that we're not completely, hammering people unnecessarily.
Yeah, grace.
Absolutely.
Another one on the list here is I get distracted and I put things off. I saw it later on saying I do the things that I enjoy first, and then I try and get to things that I don't enjoy, and actually, that's not the right category. So those things, but distraction is something, and I think in here it's not necessarily a bad habit, but it's something we do have to be mindful of. Is we deal with a lot of interruptions all the time. So I'm working on something, and it might be a volunteer or a staff member or a phone call, and so that kind of intense, that focused work where you need some time to do something. I need to think about my venue and my base. Am I going to be based at home today, or am I going to be based in the office, and start thinking about how those tasks kind of tie up and manage. Because there's no point in trying to do focused work when you're sat in the church office. Everyone wants to have a chat. Longer coffee breaks, which is another focus
ties
here.
in. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And the gossip and everything else. Of course, we don't gossip as church administrators, do we?
Never would we ever want to find out more about something which we've perhaps got an inkling of something going on. No, never.
Yeah, I like to be ahead of the game. I don't want any surprises. So I have my little ears out. But it's So there's some some interesting ones. Anything else that you're seeing here?
One of the things which I think actually ties in with what you just mentioned there about the gossip, someone put about listening to negativity and or gossip. And I think there is a difference between the two. And actually the negativity side of things is something which, depending on your context, it may be that you work in an environment where there's no negativity whatsoever, but the likelihood is at some point there will be. And how you react and deal with that, I think, is really important to think through before you're in the midst of it. So, to make this bad habit of listening to negativity into a good habit, kind of think through what could be a good way of handling that. Because there are times in my workplace where there is a bit of why, and something's happened and someone's frustrated and they're verbally processing it through, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for them at that moment, but then you're on the receiving end of it, and how to deal with that, how to help that person in that negativity processing, to help them to move through it, but also to not get caught up in it. I think that's something which, if you can maybe think it through for yourself beforehand, that's not a bad habit to be in, to sort of accept that negativity exists, but how you then engage with it or how you react to it is actually more important than just having the negativity present.
I think that's good. Another one on here, not very good at asking for help.
I can't relate to that at all.
True story.
That's
It's
that's definitely nothing that I've ever had a problem with.
Drawing people in. I think the other flip side of that is and Pete's challenged me so many times on this, is feeling the responsibility for none of the plates to drop and to crash. So I'm not responsible for teens, or I'm not responsible for this, or worship, or whatever those different teams are, but you suddenly become aware of something and you're going, I want to save it, I want to jump in, and I want to make sure everything keeps going, but actually this is kind of outside of my responsibility and remit, and as much as my desire is to help, it's going to cost me either time with the family, or cost another hour at work, or it's going to be something. And Pete's always like, sometimes you just got to let the plate crash.
Sometimes there can be a really good learning outcome from the plate crashing as well, I guess.
For whoever's involved in that team, in realising,
exactly.
there are things there. And I think that's it's so difficult though in the moment when you feel the responsibility and you want things to go well and you love people, you love your church, but actually letting it drop. And I remember going through those feelings when we stopped doing the mothers and toddlers groups for a period of time because we didn't have someone who could run it. But I'm thinking, okay, well, if we get 12 people who do one session over the next 3 months, we could make this still work. And then you're like, no, we haven't got the person to lead it. We haven't got the person who's got the heart to do it. And so we're going to have to just turn it off until we have that person. And it feels quite negative and it feels like a bit of a failure, but actually, no, it's not. And actually, we do have to let it go. So let it go, let it go.
A good old Disney moment.
Yeah, there is some truth in that somewhere.
I'll go with that. Was one that actually just struck me then when I was looking over again at the feedback, which I think is quite an important one to flag up, just about the fact that someone's written about a lack of understanding about the role and the governance importance of the role and the policies that we may be writing and trying to get people to adopt and to work with. Those things aren't necessarily the most exciting part of the role or the most exciting part of probably people's roles within the church. It's a sad reflection of our minds, perhaps, that we actually have a little bit of pride in some of those policies that we spent hours working over and trying to make work for our contexts. But actually, I think when you've got people who perhaps aren't engaging with those, it's not necessarily a personal reflection on you. And I think that's something that you've got to always bear in mind, is that it's more of a reflection on them. As long as you've done what you possibly can to make it accessible, make it functional, and you've explained that to whoever needs to know about the governance and the policy setup, but then it's effectively in their hands. It's a little bit that plate smashing situation. At some point they're going to need that policy, and when that happens, they will suddenly realise that negativity they've had towards you and that frustration they've had towards you in that aspect of your role was uncalled for. And I guess we've just got to have grace and patience in that, as people trying to push that through in a way which isn't going to drive us mad in the process.
No, absolutely right. No, it is so true. And I think some of the times that I can get offended and do stuff is like, I haven't heard about something that's happening that the elders have been talking about, and suddenly it's out there in the church, and someone comes to me and says, "Oh, do you know about this?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't even know about this." And so rather than being kind of, applying the gospel and grace and patience and go and have a chat to him and say, "Oh, is there anything I can do to, to serve in this, or, is this, where's this going, and, what's the kind of history on this, and how's it all come about?" I kind of go into my self-pity mode. Oh yeah, nobody tells me unless they want my help or something like that. This kind of, and self-pity comes up. So at least I'm not the only one who struggles with that. So, but it is, we like to be informed, and we want to be informed early so we can be ahead. But actually, we can't and shouldn't know everything and feel like we carry everything. So it's good. I think we should celebrate those things that we don't know about. And actually enjoy
the things
them.
that we don't need to know about. There's probably a good reason for that, and it's probably a little bit of liberation for us to not have to have that responsibility. I definitely
laugh and smile a lot more things than you did in the past. I love it. Someone says, "Oh, I can easily organise this event." I was like, "Fantastic. Go for it, have a and then just watch it as it unfolds." That's probably a bad thing. Well, we're talking about bad habits, so there we are. That's probably a bad thing. There's lots there, isn't there? We've got to be good at applying the gospel. To not only to ourselves, because it is humbling, isn't it, when you make mistakes or you get things wrong. We've got to move away from that perfectionism culture to that gospel culture that says, actually, I'm broken, I'm a sinner, I'm going to make mistakes, there's going to be mixed motives, and people are going to see that, and attitudes are not always going to be good, and I need to be able to apply the gospel to myself, and then also apply the gospel to my colleagues, to my work colleagues,
absolutely,
who are the same. We are all the same. We live in a broken world. We are broken people. all in need of grace. And
absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway from all of this, isn't it? Really, that fundamental need for that gospel to be applied in everything we do.
Yeah. And the sheer privilege that we get to be involved in gospel ministry. I love that. Let us never kind of grow old with that, idea that the parts that we're playing, this very practical things that we're doing, as you follow the thread and the church does what it does, whether it's Sunday or whether it's outreach, it is taking the gospel out there, and we're playing a part in that. And I get excited about that still.
Yeah, it is absolutely a privilege
love
as well.
that.
It's just something that sometimes, in the midst of all the minutiae and lists and everything else, it's easy to lose that focus. But it is, what we're doing is such a privilege, and that's super exciting.
It is. Well, let's finish on that note, isn't it? So
let's finish more positively.
Yeah. So we've enjoyed this survey. If you've participated, then I've probably told you 10 times, but thank you. I mean, it's great because we can sit here, learn, and recognize stuff in ourselves, and go, I need to change. I want to change to be a better leader, to lead other people better, to be effective for the gospel. That's our heart. And so thanks for being part of that. We'll publish these. I'll probably get Catherine to do it because she's probably far better at presenting this than I am. And we'll stick it on the website for people to have a look through themselves. And if you're listening to the podcast and this is the first one you've captured, the bad habits, then go back and have a listen to the good habits.
Yeah, I think they go as a pair. I think you need to listen to both.
And then go back and listen to the one about grace and how grace is at work in church administrators' lives. Working behind the scenes. It is a joy and a privilege, and I love hearing about it. So, Anna, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for your support of the church office, and just our partnership together is great. So the guys in Liverpool, we love them. The Cornerstone Collective.
Oh, they're a good bunch, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege again. It's
great. Well, if there's anything that we can do to support you or serve you, then please get in contact at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. The website's there. We're adding new stuff, every week if we can, and new authors and other people are contributing. And we want this resource to be a kingdom resource that serves administrators, that serves pastors, that serves church, which ultimately is about bringing glory to God and taking the gospel out there. So thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.